This time, I'd like to talk about the diplomacy of the Chinese Communist Party, or rather, the Xi Jinping administration. Recently, there has been considerable coverage in Japan about China spending a huge amount of money in Africa. This has also been reported extensively in Chinese media, with reports of 3.6 trillion yuan being distributed. Japanese articles are saying that it's over 7 trillion yen. It seems this amount will be spent over the next 3 years, but this money isn't just being handed out as aid, there's more to it. The major part is that it's not just free money, it's a loan. China is lending money, which means that in the long term, China intends to recover this money. Although there is a bit of aid, the main point is investment by Chinese companies. In short, a large amount of money is about to flow from China into Africa. However, there is dissatisfaction even within China about this. Moreover, China's economy is in decline, and people's livelihoods are under pressure. For instance, many young people cannot find jobs, some are not receiving bonuses, and others are even experiencing wage cuts. Despite these domestic issues, the government is spending money on Africa. There's discontent about this, but I'll address that later. First, let's explore why the Xi Jinping administration is distributing such large sums to Africa. Xi Jinping has been promoting the Belt and Road Initiative for a long time. This initiative is essentially about Chinese companies controlling foreign infrastructure. When these countries build infrastructure using Chinese money, it might seem like aid, but it's actually loans. China says it will finance the construction, and Chinese companies will do the work, using Chinese materials. So while it appears as if they are supporting other countries, in reality, Chinese companies, and by extension, the Communist Party, end up controlling important infrastructure in these nations. The real aim of the Belt and Road Initiative is for China to dominate key infrastructure in various countries. Those countries end up burdened with huge debts. There are already examples of this, such as Indonesia's high-speed rail project. Originally, Japan was supposed to handle this project, but China took it over, with the Indonesian government allowing it. So what's happening now? I made a video about this last September, explaining it in detail, especially in the latter half, where the discussion relates to African countries as well. You can check the video for more details. In essence, Xi Jinping's regime is offering what looks like foreign aid, but the reality is that it's Chinese domination under the guise of the Belt and Road Initiative. There are already countries suffering the consequences, but many African nations are still going along with China's strategy. Why do these countries accept China's offers when they know it will burden them and their people? That's an important point. I also discussed this toward the end of the video on Indonesia. Now, the second reason for China's massive spending in Africa is the control of natural resources, especially underground ones. How does this work? Chinese companies and local governments set up joint ventures to develop mines, and China pours money into these resource development projects. In the long term, China recovers the money it spends through these projects. Although China is pouring over 7 trillion yen into Africa, the Chinese Communist Party views this as an investment that will be repaid over time. Additionally, it's important to note that China's aid to Africa didn't start under Xi Jinping, it goes back to the Mao Zedong era. Even when China was facing severe domestic problems, Mao Zedong continued supporting Africa, despite widespread hunger in China. Xi Jinping, following in Mao's footsteps, is continuing this strategy. Despite many Chinese people struggling financially, China is still spending heavily in Africa. So, why does the Chinese Communist Party support Africa? One reason is the United Nations votes. African countries hold votes at the UN, and China wants to keep them as allies. Another reason is the status of Taiwan. There are countries in the world that recognize Taiwan as an independent state. If more countries recognize Taiwan, it could lead to an international consensus that Taiwan is a separate country, which China is trying to prevent. By providing financial support, China can ensure that African nations align with its stance on Taiwan. While many Chinese people are unhappy with the government's spending in Africa, those in power view it as a strategic investment. The Chinese Communist Party does not see the world as divided between Chinese and foreigners, rather, it sees it as divided between those who rule and those who are ruled. Even within China, the party views ordinary citizens as people it controls, not people it serves. Therefore, rather than using money to help its struggling citizens, the Chinese Communist Party spends money on Africa because it sees it as a way to strengthen its international influence. Supporting Africa also benefits Chinese companies, which in turn strengthens the Communist Party. In this way, the party prioritizes international influence and economic gains over domestic welfare. This perspective isn't unique to China, Many ruling elites in other countries share a similar worldview. Finally, I'd like to mention Japan. If the Japanese government is prioritizing foreign students over Japanese students, then that's something we need to question. The government is supposed to serve the Japanese people and Japanese companies, but if Japanese citizens are bearing more burdens while foreign entities benefit, then something is wrong. To conclude, the Chinese Communist Party isn't a government that serves the Chinese people, it's a regime that controls them. Even though the Chinese people are struggling, the party believes that spending money in Africa is more beneficial to maintaining its power. If similar things are happening in Japan, where the government is not serving its own people, then that's a serious issue we need to address.